From common soldiers to high-ranking officials, the Nazi regime was undoubtedly filled with many violent and callous men throughout its 12-year grip on Germany. Not many of these men, however, could lay claim to being just as unnerving, sadistic, and downright cold as Reinhard Heydrich, whose actions and disturbing temperament eventually earned him the nickname of the Man with the Iron Heart from Hitler himself. But how did Heydrich become what many historians consider one of the darkest men within the Third Reich? How exactly did he earn his numerous unsettling nicknames? And how did he ultimately meet his violent and premature end midway through the Second World War? Well, those are the questions I'm going to be answering in today's video, so without further ado, let's get straight into it. Starting at the beginning, Reinhard Tristan Eugen Heydrich was born on the 7th of March 1904 in Halle to composer, opera singer, and founder of the Halle Conservatory, Richard Bruno Heydrich, and his wife Elizabeth. During Reinhard's upbringing, the Heydrich family held a high social standing in the Halle area and were financially well off. Unsurprisingly, due to his father's occupation, music was a key part of their strict household, with Reinhard proving to learn both the piano and violin by the time he was 6 years old, the latter of which he developed a passion for that carried into adulthood. Reinhard's father, alongside his musical interests, was a German nationalist with loyalties to the Kaiser and instilled patriotic ideas into Reinhard, as well as his younger siblings Heinz and Maria during their youth. Despite the imposing frame he would later grow into, Reinhard was quite frail and sickly during these early years of his life and was noted as being shy, insecure, and frequently bullied by his peers due to his high-pitched voice and rumoured Jewish ancestry. In order to address some of his physical shortcomings, Reinhard was encouraged by his parents to exercise and build up his strength and eventually became an expert swimmer and fencer. In late February 1919, when Heydrich was 15 years old, civil unrest, including strikes and clashes between communist and anti-communist groups in the aftermath of Germany's defeat in the First World War, took place in Halle, and a right-wing paramilitary unit was formed in order to recapture the city, with Heydrich joining a Freikorps unit known as Merkers Volunteer Rifles, although this was largely symbolic as Heydrich was still too young for military service, and there is no evidence he personally participated in the fighting throughout the city. Regardless, during this time, Heydrich began to form positive opinions about the Volkisch movement and anti-communism, as well as a dislike for the Treaty of Versailles and the positioning of the German-Polish border, all factors that would be heavily incorporated into the later National Socialism ideology. In the years following this, due to the harsh conditions of the Treaty of Versailles and Germany's large war debt, hyperinflation rapidly spread across the country, with many families losing their life savings in the process. As a result of these harsh economic circumstances, by about 1921 there were few townspeople who could afford a musical education at the Halle Conservatory, which led to a financial crisis for the Heydrich family. Likely at least partially due to these factors, Reinhard decided to enlist in the German Navy on the 30th of March 1922, less than a month after his 18th birthday, taking advantage of the security, structure, and pension it offered, despite the earlier expectation of his family that he would inherit the conservatory from his father and pursue a career in music. Following his enlistment, Reinhard became a naval cadet at Kiel, Germany's primary naval base at the time, where many of his fellow cadets falsely regarded him as Jewish, with Heydrich telling people he had joined several anti-Semitic and nationalist organizations, such as the Deutsch-Völkischer Schutz and Trutzband, in an effort to combat these rumors. Despite these rumors, on the 1st of April 1924, he was promoted to senior midshipman and sent to officer training at the Naval Academy in Mervik. Upon his return from this training, he was promoted once more in 1926 and assigned as a signals officer on the battleship SMS Schleswig-Holstein. During this time, Heydrich received good evaluations from his superiors and had few problems with other crewmen. Heydrich was again promoted a couple years later, on the 1st of July 1928, to the rank of First Lieutenant at just 24 years old. Despite his rapid rise in rank, during this time in the Navy, Heydrich became notorious for his numerous affairs, and in December 1930 attended a rowing club ball where he met Lena von Osten, with the pair soon becoming romantically involved and announcing their engagement. Crucially, Lena was already a Nazi Party follower and anti-Semite, having attended her first rally in 19 1929. This engagement proved to be the end of Heydrich's naval career, as in early 1931 he was charged with conduct unbecoming an officer and a gentleman for refusing to marry a shipyard director's daughter with whom he had an affair and was possibly engaged to prior to his engagement to Lena. Due to his actions, Admiral Erich Raeder dismissed Heydrich from the Navy in April, which became legally binding on the 30th of May. Following this dismissal, Heydrich, likely encouraged by his new fiancée, joined the Nazi Party in Hamburg on either the 31st of May or 1st of June, before also joining the SS 6 weeks later on the 14th of July. Not long after Heydrich joined, Heinrich Himmler, the man who would become the second in command of Nazi Germany, began setting up a counterintelligence division of the SS, and acting on the advice of his associate Karl von Eberstein, who was Lena's friend and Heydrich's godfather, agreed to interview Heydrich. In a somewhat strange turn of events, Himmler actually cancelled their appointment at the last minute, but Lena ignored the message, packed Heydrich's suitcase, and sent him to Munich anyways, where he met with Eberstein, who took him to the railway station to see Himmler. Upon their meeting, Himmler asked Heydrich to convey his ideas for developing an SS intelligence service, after which Himmler was said to be so impressed that he hired him immediately. Heydrich began his job as the chief of the new intelligence service on the 1st of August 1931, setting up his office at the Braun House, which was the name given to the Nazi headquarters in Munich. He seemingly took quite well to his new career, as by October he had already created a network of spies and informers for intelligence gathering purposes, as well as to obtain information to be used as blackmail to further the Nazis' political aims. Further indicating his higher-ups' satisfaction with his efforts, to mark the occasion of his wedding to Lena in December of 1931, Himmler promoted Heydrich to the rank of SS Sturmbannführer, or Major. This rapid rise through the ranks was thrown into turmoil, however, when in 1932 rumours were spread by Heydrich's opponents of his alleged Jewish ancestry, with Wilhelm Canaris even claiming to have obtained copies of documents proving his Jewish ancestry. Accusations which would obviously have had catastrophic consequences if found to be true, even for a man of his status within the regime. Due to the perceived seriousness of these allegations, Gregor Strasser passed them on to the Nazi Party's racial expert, Achim Gürker, who conducted an investigation into Heydrich's genealogy, at the conclusion of which he reported that Heydrich was of German origin and free from any coloured and Jewish blood, and insisted that the rumours were baseless. Not happy with just these results, Heydrich then privately engaged Ernst Hoffmann to further investigate and dispel the rumours, which had seemingly followed him his entire life up until that point. With the rumours eventually finally settling down, in mid-1932, Heydrich received another promotion from Himmler, being appointed the chief of the renamed security service, the Sicherheitsdienst, or SD for short, which soon after began employing more and more violent and brazen tactics in their efforts to control the political police forces of all 17 German states. These efforts began in Bavaria, the birthplace of National Socialism, when in 1933, following Hitler's appointment as Chancellor, Heydrich gathered some of his men from the SD and stormed the police headquarters in Munich, shortly after which Heydrich was appointed chief of the political department of the Munich police force, before helping to bring the remainder of the political police forces throughout Germany under Himmler's control thereafter. Due to his significant contributions to the party's success thus far, Heydrich's rise in station only continued when, following Hermann Göring's transfer of authority over the Gestapo to Himmler in April 1934, Himmler named Heydrich to head the soon-to-become notorious organization. Further boosting his station, in that same month, Göring also made Heydrich an advisor to the Prussian government with an appointment to the Prussian State Council. It would also be during April 1934 that, at Hitler's request, Heydrich and Himmler began building a dossier on SA leader Ernst Röhm in an effort to remove him as a rival for party leadership. Although at this point the SS was still a part of the SA, at Hitler's direction once again, Heydrich, Himmler, Göring, and Victor Lutz drew up lists of those who should be killed in order to secure Hitler's grip on the party, starting with 7 top SA officials, including Röhm, as well as many more. These lists would soon be acted upon, starting on the 30th of June 1934, when the SS and Gestapo acted in coordinated mass arrests that continued for 2 days, with Röhm soon being shot without trial alongside the other leadership of the SA. This purge, which became known as the Night of the Long Knives, resulted in up to 200 people being killed and Lutz being appointed as the SA's new head, converting the once paramilitary organization into a sports and training one. With the SA out the way, Heydrich soon began building his Gestapo into an instrument of fear, improving his index card system by creating categories of offenders with color-coded cards. During this time, the power of the Gestapo soon grew so great that they had the authority to arrest citizens on the mere suspicion that they might commit a crime, the definition of which was up to them. The Gestapo was further strengthened in 1936 when the aptly named Gestapo law was passed, which gave police the right to act extra-legally, leading to the sweeping use of the Schutzhaft, or protective custody in English, a euphemism which referred to the power to imprison people without judicial proceedings. The courts were not even allowed to investigate or interfere with these processes in any way either, as the Gestapo was considered to be acting legally as long as it was carrying out the leadership's will. This impunity unsurprisingly resulted in many people being arbitrarily arrested, sent to concentration camps, or killed. Similar to his organizations, Heydrich himself also personally gained more power in June 1936, when all of the police forces throughout Germany were united following Hitler's appointment of Himmler as chief of German police, immediately making both Himmler and Heydrich two of the most powerful men in the Nazi administration. A few months after this promotion, in January 1937, Heydrich escalated the SD's reign of terror over the population when he directed his men to secretly begin collecting and analysing public opinion before ordering the Gestapo to carry out house searches, arrests, and interrogations of those found to have anti-Nazi sentiments, effectively forcing the general population into an, at the least, passive acceptance of the Nazi regime. These tactics of influencing public opinion would be apparent once again in early 1938 when, following the Austrian Chancellor Kurt Schushnig's refusal of Hitler's proposed merger with Germany, Heydrich and his SD intensified their pressure on Austria by organising Nazi demonstrations and distributing propaganda in Vienna emphasising the common Germanic blood of the two countries, tactics which greatly contributed to the eventual Anschluss on the 12th of March, where Hitler declared the unification of Austria with Nazi Germany. After his antics in Austria, Heydrich went on to be one of the main organisers of Kristallnacht in November 1938, where on the night of the 9th to the 10th of November, over 1,400 synagogues and prayer rooms, alongside 7,000 Jewish businesses throughout Germany, Austria, and the Sudetenland, were damaged or destroyed. On top of these losses, about 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and incarcerated in concentration camps on Heydrich's orders, with at least a further 91 Jews being killed on the night itself. The Times of London later reported on the 11th of November of the incident that no foreign propagandist bent upon blackening Germany before the world could outdo the tale of burnings and beatings, of blackguardly assaults on defenceless and innocent people which disgraced that country yesterday. Following Kristallnacht, Heydrich continued his usual operations of forcing compliance to the Nazi regime and generally terrorizing the population, until in 1939 Hitler sought a pretext for the invasion of Poland that would prove to be the beginning of World War II, and tasked Himmler, Heydrich, and Heinrich Müller to devise a plan eventually codenamed Operation Himmler. This false flag, supervised by Heydrich, involved German troops dressed in Polish uniforms, storming various border buildings, scaring the locals with inaccurate shots, and carrying out acts of vandalism before leaving behind dead bodies in Polish uniforms to simulate Polish casualties. These bodies were, in reality, those of prisoners from nearby concentration camps, as well as a local Polish Silesian activist who had been killed by lethal injection before being shot for appearances and left behind. The most notable action of the so-called Operation Himmler, that was personally masterminded by Heydrich himself, came on the night of the 31st of August 1939, when a small group of German operatives dressed in Polish uniforms and led by Alfred Neujoks seized the Gleiwitz radio station and broadcast a short anti-German message in Polish before leaving several dead bodies on the scene, including the aforementioned Polish Silesian activist named Franciszek Honiok, whose body was later presented to the police and press as proof of the attack. The day following this Gleiwitz incident on the 1st of September, Germany officially declared war on Poland, citing these border incidents as justification for the invasion. With the war now in motion, Himmler instructed Heydrich to form the Einsatzgruppen to travel in the wake of the German armies, with Heydrich on the 21st of September 1939 sending out a teleprinter message on the Jewish question in the occupied territory to the chiefs of all Einsatzgruppen with instructions to round up Jewish people for placement into ghettos. Strangely, during the invasion of Poland, Heydrich actually personally ensured the safety of certain athletes, such as Paul Sommer, a Jewish-German champion fencer he knew from his pre-SS days, as well as the Polish Olympic fencing team that competed at the 1936 Summer Olympics. You would be mistaken if you thought this mercy extended to other Poles, however, as also during September, Heydrich created the Zentralstelle IIP Poland unit of the Gestapo to coordinate the ethnic cleansing of Poles in Operation Tannenberg and the Intelligenzaktion, which eventually resulted in the murder of about 20,000 Poles over the course of around 1 to 2 months, primarily carried out by the previously mentioned Einsatzgruppen. Not long after the invasion of Poland, during a period known as the Phony War, Heydrich further issued a cable about the evacuation of new eastern provinces on the 29th of November 1939, where he detailed the deportation of people by railway to concentration camps and gave guidance surrounding the December 1939 census, which would be the basis on which those deportations were performed. As the Phony War ended and Germany successfully conquered most of Western Europe, the need for a more organised and centralised plan than the Einsatzgruppen became clear to the German command, and thus, on the 31st of July 1941, Hermann Göring gave written authorisation to Heydrich to prepare and submit a plan for a total solution of the Jewish question in territories under German control and to coordinate the participation of all involved government organisations. It would be while Heydrich was formulating this plan that he was appointed Deputy Reich Protector of the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, which was the name given to the part of Czechoslovakia occupied by the Germans in early 1939 on the 27th of September 1941. The reason for Heydrich's appointment was that Hitler, Himmler, and Heydrich alike believed that the previous Reich Protector, Konstantin von Neurath, was too lenient and soft on the Czechs, and that his more gentle approach was responsible for the significant amount of anti-German sentiment and resistance in the region. Highlighting their differences in methods, upon his appointment, Heydrich supposedly told his aides that we will Germanize the Czech vermin. Upon Heydrich's arrival in Prague not long after, he quickly proclaimed martial law and executed 142 people within the first 5 days, most of whom were members of the resistance that had previously been captured and were awaiting trial, before plastering their names on posters placed all throughout the occupied country. According to Heydrich's own estimates, between 4,000 and 5,000 people were also arrested during this period. In addition to these more forceful measures, Heydrich also implemented many projects throughout the Protectorate to improve social and economic conditions in an attempt to appease the masses, including, but not limited to, food rations and free shoes being distributed, pensions being increased, and unemployment insurance being established for the first time. Despite these projects and his public displays of goodwill towards the populace, in private Heydrich remained very clear about his eventual goal for the Protectorate and its people, being quoted as saying, "This entire area will one day be definitely German, and the Czechs have nothing to expect here." While Heydrich's plans and private distaste for the Czechs was clear, it seems at this point his main priority was still the Jews, as on the 10th of October 1941, he was the senior officer at a final solution meeting of the RSHA in Prague that discussed deporting 50,000 Jews from the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia to ghettos in Minsk and Riga. Given his position, Heydrich was instrumental in the eventual carrying out of these plans, since his Gestapo was ready to organize deportations in the west, and his Einsatzgruppen were already conducting extensive killing operations in the east, in Poland and the occupied parts of the Soviet Union. During this meeting, the attending officers also discussed, among other things, the establishment of ghettos in the Protectorate, resulting in the construction of the Theresienstadt ghetto, where 33,000 people would eventually die. It would be a few months after this first meeting in Prague that Heydrich's previously mentioned plan for the solution to the Jewish question was ready, with him subsequently calling what would become known as the Wannsee Conference for the 20th of January 1942. Notable attendees at the conference included Otto Hoffmann, head of the SS Race and Settlement Main Office, Heinrich Müller, head of the Gestapo, Karl Eberhard Schöngarth, commander of the SIPO and the SD in the general government, and Adolf Eichmann, the man later known as the architect of the Holocaust, and at the time head of Referat IV-B4 of the Gestapo recording secretary, among many others. The main purpose of this conference was to ensure the cooperation of administrative leaders of various government departments in the implementation of the final solution to the Jewish question, which Heydrich outlined as a plan to round up all European Jews and send them to extermination camps in the so-called general government or occupied Poland, where they would be killed. Following the conclusion of the Wannsee Conference, which was held in Berlin and only actually lasted about an hour and a half, Heydrich returned to Prague, where he continued his reign of terror over the populace, enacting further sweeps against Czech cultural and patriotic organizations, the military, and the intelligentsia in March 1942, closing almost all avenues by which Czechs could express Czech culture in public and effectively paralyzing the Czech resistance to German rule, with public and widespread reprisals also being enforced by the Nazis against any action resisting their rule. It would be these brutal policies during this time in early 1942 which quickly earned Heydrich one of his more ominous nicknames of the Butcher of Prague. It was perhaps this combination of policies, alongside his supposed success in pacifying the Czech population, that lulled Heydrich into the false sense of security that would ultimately prove to be his downfall. On the 27th of May 1942, Heydrich, as per usual, started his daily commute from his home 14 kilometers north of central Prague to his headquarters at Prague Castle, driven by SS Oberscharführer Johann Klein. Unfortunately for Heydrich, along his daily commute there was a hairpin between two roads which forced motorists to slow down exponentially as they rounded the tight curve, a location deemed perfect for the long-planned attempt on his life. Unbeknownst to Heydrich, on that morning, two men awaited him at a tram stop at the junction, Czech Jan Kubis and Slovak Josef Gabček, both of whom had spent months training in the UK for this exact mission. Shortly after 10:30 am on that fateful morning, as Heydrich's car slowed down for the hairpin, Gabček brandished a Sten submachine gun he'd been hiding under a raincoat, took aim and attempted to fire, but the gun jammed. Seeing this, Heydrich then stood up from his seat, drew his Luger pistol, and yelled at Klein to halt instead of accelerating to escape. It was at this point that the second assassin, Kubis, who had not yet been spotted, threw a modified No. 73 grenade concealed in a briefcase at the car. Kubis, however, misjudged his throw, and instead of the grenade landing inside the car as intended, it landed against the rear wheel, nonetheless severely wounding Heydrich when it detonated, causing serious injuries to his left side, including major damage to his diaphragm, spleen, and lung, as well as a fractured rib, though not immediately incapacitating him. As a result, Heydrich, as well as the less injured Klein, were able to leap out of the shattered Mercedes with pistols drawn, Klein running towards Kubis and Heydrich towards Gabček. Kubis, in the midst of the chaos, managed to quickly jump on his bicycle and began pedaling away. Klein attempted to shoot at him, but still dazed by the explosion, accidentally pressed the magazine release catch, causing his gun to jam and allowing Kubis to escape relatively unharmed. Gabček, on the other hand, found himself in a bit more precarious situation as the staggering Heydrich came towards him. Gabček likewise attempted to reach his bicycle, but was forced to abandon the attempt and take cover behind a telegraph pole. As the two began exchanging pistol fire, Gabček having dropped his jammed Sten gun in the chaos, Heydrich suddenly doubled over and staggered to the side of the road in pain, eventually collapsing against the railings, holding himself up with one hand. Seeing this, Gabček took the opportunity to run, as Klein rushed to help the gravely injured Heydrich, who pointed towards the fleeing Gabček and ordered Klein to get that bastard, soon stumbling along the pavement before collapsing against the bonnet of his wrecked car. As Klein, on the other hand, gave pursuit, Gabček fled into a nearby butcher's shop, where unfortunately for him, the owner, a man named Brauer, who was a Nazi sympathizer and had a brother working in the Gestapo, not only ignored his request for help, but ran out to the street, alerting Klein and pointing towards the shop. Klein, whose gun was still jammed, then ran into the shop where he collided with Gabček in the doorway. In the confusion, Gabček managed to shoot Klein twice, severely wounding him in the leg, before escaping by tram and reaching a local safe house. While all this was happening, a Czech woman and an off-duty police officer both rushed to Heydrich's aid and flagged down a delivery van which took him to the emergency room of the nearby Bulovka hospital. Despite his serious injuries, Heydrich's condition stabilized at the hospital as Himmler ordered Karl Gebhard to fly to Prague to assume care. Over the course of the next few days, Heydrich's recovery appeared to be progressing well, with Gebhard believing Heydrich would recover and declining the suggestion of Hitler's personal doctor, Theodor Morell, to use the new antibacterial drug sulfonamide. Gebhard appeared to be correct as Heydrich's fever began to subside and his condition improved until, while sitting up eating a noon meal on the 3rd of June, he suddenly went into shock and slipped into a deep coma before dying in the early hours of the following morning on Thursday, the 4th of June 1942 at around 4:30 am. Now, I actually made an entire video about Heydrich's assassination a few years ago, so if you want to know more details, especially about the lead up to it, I'll put a card up so you can check that out if you want. With that little self-promo out the way, following Heydrich's death, an elaborate funeral was held in Prague on the 7th of June, before his coffin was sent to Berlin, where a second ceremony was held in the new Reich Chancellery on the 9th of June with Hitler in attendance. Although Heydrich's death was employed for pro-Reich propaganda, as is to be expected, it seems that Hitler actually privately blamed Heydrich for his own death through carelessness, stating that since it is opportunity which makes not only the thief but also the assassin, such heroic gestures as driving in an open, unarmoured vehicle or walking about the streets unguarded are just damned stupidity, which serves the fatherland not one whit. That a man as irreplaceable as Heydrich should expose himself to unnecessary danger I can only condemn as stupid and idiotic. As for Heydrich's assassins, unfortunately they would both be killed alongside a few others in a standoff with the SS and Gestapo at an Orthodox church in Prague on the 18th of June. Tragically, the Nazis weren't content with just the assassins' deaths, however, as Hitler also ordered brutal reprisals in the wake of Heydrich's demise, most notably the Lidice massacre in June, which resulted in the murder of 340 people, including 82 children, proving that even in death, Heydrich was still able to cause untold suffering on the same people he had brutally ruled over in life. Well, I think that's where I'm going to end the video, guys. I'm not going to say if you enjoyed it, given the subject matter, but if you found the video interesting, make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos from me. With that being said though, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great day, night, wherever you are, and I hope to see you in the next one.